My family thought I was crazy for marrying him. Then his lies started to unravel. When I brought Damon home for Christmas, my mother pulled me aside within 10 minutes. "There's something off about him," she whispered, gripping my arm. "The way he answers questions, it's like he's performing." My sister was blunter. "He's too perfect. Nobody's childhood is that flawless. Nobody remembers college stories word for word like that." Even my dad, who liked everyone, seemed uncomfortable. During dinner, Damon told elaborate stories about his Stanford MBA, his deceased parents' ranch in Montana, his volunteer work building schools in Guatemala. Each tale was perfectly crafted, complete with emotional beats and inspiring conclusions. "Remember when Dad got lost in the woods as a kid?" my sister asked later, when Damon was in the bathroom. "He tells that story differently every time because memory's messy. But this guy? His stories are identical every single time. It's like he rehearsed his whole life story," my brother muttered. I defended him fiercely. After years of dating losers who forgot my birthday and argued over splitting dinner bills, I'd finally found someone worthy. Damon was everything I'd dreamed of. Charming, successful, generous. He drove a BMW, wore expensive suits, and took me to restaurants where I had to Google the menu just to understand what we were eating. We met at a charity gala where he bid $5,000 on a weekend getaway just to talk to me. "I had to meet the woman who made that beautiful speech," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. He sent flowers to my office every Friday with handwritten notes that made my coworkers jealous. He remembered details about my childhood that I'd mentioned once in passing, like how I'd wanted to be a veterinarian before discovering I was allergic to cats. When I got food poisoning from questionable sushi, he showed up at my apartment with homemade chicken soup and stayed to take care of me, holding my hair back while I was sick. "Most guys would run," I told him weakly. "I'm not most guys," he replied, stroking my forehead with such tenderness it made me cry. My friends were jealous. My coworkers asked for dating advice. Everyone wanted to know my secret. "How did you land him?" they'd ask, like I'd won some impossible lottery. Even my therapist seemed impressed. "He sounds almost too good to be true," she said during one session. "That's what my family keeps saying. But maybe I just finally deserve something good." The proposal came after 4 months. Not some elaborate public display, but intimate and perfect. Just us on the beach where we'd had our first real conversation. Him nervous and stammering as he pulled out a ring that caught the sunset perfectly. "I know it's fast," he said, his hands shaking slightly. "But when you know, you know. And I know I want to spend my life making you as happy as you make me." We married 2 months later in an expensive ceremony he insisted on paying for. "Nothing's too good for my bride," he said, booking the most exclusive venue in the city. The flowers alone cost more than my car payment. He hired a string quartet, flew in a chef from San Francisco, and surprised me with fireworks during our first dance. My family attended reluctantly, wearing forced smiles and whispering concerns they thought I couldn't hear. "Did you see how he corrected the photographer's grammar?" my aunt murmured. "Who does that at their own wedding? And why won't he let anyone take pictures with his phone?" my cousin added. "Says his camera's broken, but I saw him using it earlier." "He's controlling the narrative," my brother said quietly. Notice how he steered every conversation away from his past? I brushed off their concerns. They were just jealous that I'd found happiness after years of relationship disasters. Besides, Damon's attention to detail was one of the things I loved about him. He was sophisticated, polished, everything my previous boyfriends hadn't been. The honeymoon in Bali was supposed to be our perfect beginning. We'd talked about it for months. 2 weeks in paradise, just us. No distractions. The resort was stunning. Our villa overlooked the ocean, and for the first 2 days, everything felt magical. The first crack appeared on day 3. We'd spent the morning exploring temples and markets, laughing and taking pictures like any normal newlyweds. Back at our resort, Damon left his phone by the pool while he went to get drinks from the beach bar. When it buzzed with texts, I glanced over casually. The message preview made my blood freeze. "Stop using my photos. My wife is getting suspicious. Delete that profile immediately." My hands shook as I picked up the phone. Before I could read more, another message appeared. "I know you're reading this. Stop pretending to be me or I'll expose everything." When I confronted him, Damon laughed it off with that same charming smile that had won me over. "Business partner's jealous ex," he explained smoothly, wrapping his arms around me. "She's been harassing all his associates since their breakup. Total psycho. You know how crazy exes can get." He kissed my forehead tenderly. "I should have warned you. She's been sending threatening messages for months. My lawyer says to ignore her completely." The explanation made sense, and the way he held me, so protective and loving, convinced me he was telling the truth. I let it go, pushing down the nagging feeling in my stomach. But then our credit card was declined at dinner that night. We were at an upscale restaurant overlooking the ocean, celebrating our second day of marriage, when the waiter returned with our card and an apologetic expression. Damon's face went white for just a second before he recovered. "Bank error," he said smoothly, pulling out another card. "International transactions sometimes trigger security holds. Happens all the time when you travel as much as I do for work." The second card was also declined. Then the third. "That's really weird," he muttered, checking his phone frantically. "Let me call the bank real quick." He stepped outside for 20 minutes, leaving me sitting alone at our candlelit table, feeling the stares of other diners. The waiter kept refilling my water glass, clearly unsure what to do. When Damon returned, his smile was strained and his forehead was sweating despite the evening breeze. All sorted, he announced. Computer glitch in their system. They're sending new cards to the hotel tomorrow. We paid cash, but I noticed his wallet was nearly empty. He counted out bills twice, and I saw his hands trembling slightly. That night, I couldn't sleep. The phone messages kept replaying in my mind, along with the panic I'd seen flash across his face at dinner. While Damon showered, singing off-key like he always did, I grabbed his phone with trembling hands. He'd changed his passcode. It used to be my birthday, 0724. I tried his birthday, our anniversary, random combinations. Nothing worked. But when I held the phone up to catch the bathroom light, I could see fingerprint smudges on the screen. 4 numbers, used repeatedly. 8473. The phone unlocked. What I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about my husband. Dating profiles under different names. Derek Patterson, Austin Mills, Trevor Chen. Photos of other men he was using as his own, probably stolen from social media. Messages to dozens of women, each getting the same romantic lines he'd used on me. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he'd written to a blonde named Ashley in Phoenix. The exact words he'd whispered to me on our 3rd date. "I've been waiting my whole life for someone like you," he'd told a brunette named Katie in Seattle. Our first, "I love you. I want to build a future with you," he'd messaged to at least 6 different women in Los Angeles, the words he'd used when he proposed. And worse, financial documents showing massive debts, eviction notices, court judgments, credit cards maxed out in names I didn't recognize, loans taken against properties that didn't exist, even a bankruptcy filing from 2 years ago under the name David Kowalski. Everything about Damon was a lie. The man I'd married didn't exist. When he emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, humming the same song he'd sung at our wedding, I was sitting on the bed holding his phone. "Care to explain who Derek Patterson is?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. "Or maybe you prefer Austin Mills? Or how about Trevor Chen?" His charming smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. But I caught it. That moment when his mask slipped and I saw something calculating underneath. "Honey, I can explain. Which name is real?" I interrupted, standing on shaky legs. "Because according to these messages, you've been Derek with Ashley in Phoenix, Austin with Katie in Seattle, and Trevor with at least 6 different women in Los Angeles." He sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, water still dripping from his hair. For the first time since I'd met him, Damon looked genuinely uncertain. The confidence, the charm, the perfect responses, all of it was gone. "My real name is Daniel," he said quietly, staring at his hands. "Daniel Kowalski, not Damon Richards, successful consultant. Not the man who claimed his parents died in a car crash when he was 25, leaving him their Montana ranch. Daniel Kowalski from Buffalo, New York, with a bankruptcy on his record and God knows what else." "How much of it was lies?" I whispered. He looked out at the Bali sunset, his mask finally gone completely. The man sitting before me was a stranger, smaller somehow, without the confident posture and practiced gestures that had defined every moment of our relationship. "All of it," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I'm a bartender. Well, was. Got fired 3 months before I met you for stealing from the register." The room spun around me. "The BMW? Leased under a fake identity. Repo company's probably looking for it right now. The apartment? Illegal sublet from a businessman who travels for work. He comes back next month and I'll be homeless again. The expensive suits? Stolen. I boost them from department stores and return them later for store credit. Sometimes I sell them online." Every foundation of our relationship crumbled with each admission. "The wedding?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Credit cards. All maxed out now. That's why our cards didn't work tonight. I felt like I was drowning in the middle of paradise." "Why me?" Daniel finally met my eyes. The vulnerability there was the first real emotion I'd seen from him since we'd met. "You were supposed to be easy," he said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "Pretty girl with a good job, close family with money. I figured I'd play loving husband for a year, clean out your accounts, then disappear with enough cash to start over somewhere new. But," he looked genuinely confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't understand. "But you were actually nice, kind. You made me laugh with your terrible jokes. You took care of me when I faked being sick, even though it meant missing your sister's birthday party. You introduced me to your friends like you were proud to be with me." His voice cracked. "You made me feel like maybe I could be the person I was pretending to be." The cruelest part wasn't his lies. It was that somewhere in his performance he'd started to care, and somehow that made everything worse. I called my sister from the bathroom, sobbing on the cold marble floor while trying to keep my voice down. "Get me a lawyer," I whispered, "and book me a flight home, tonight." "What happened?" Rebecca's voice was sharp with concern. "You were right. About everything. He's not real. Nothing about him is real. I don't even know his real name." I could hear her typing frantically in the background, probably searching for flights. "I'm booking you on the next plane out. Can you get to the airport safely? Do you need me to call someone?" "Yeah, he won't hurt me, I don't think. He just..." "God, Rebecca, I'm so stupid." "You're not stupid," she said fiercely. "You're trusting. There's a difference." The flight back to LAX felt endless. Daniel didn't try to stop me. He just sat on the hotel bed, head in his hands, as I packed my suitcase with shaking hands. Everything I touched felt contaminated. The clothes he'd complimented, the jewelry he'd helped me pick out, even my wedding dress hanging in the closet. I can't even give you the ring back, I said, looking at my wedding band. Because it's probably fake, too. It's real, he said quietly. Cubic zirconia, but the setting is real gold. I wanted that part to be real. I laughed bitterly. How generous of you. For what it's worth, he said as I reached the door with my luggage. I'm sorry. And I did fall in love with you. That part was real. I turned back one last time. Which you? Because I don't even know who I'm talking to. He had no answer for that. Back home, my family rallied around me with remarkable restraint. No, I told you so's, just fierce protective love and my brother's friend Marcus, who happened to be a divorce attorney. First things first, Marcus explained during our emergency meeting at my parents' house. We need to secure all your financial accounts. Change every password, freeze your credit, and document everything you can remember about his behavior and timeline. That's when things got truly terrifying. Marcus made some calls and discovered there was no record of our marriage. The officiant was fake, a hired actor. The marriage license was forged. Legally, I'd never been married at all, but Daniel had access to everything for 6 months. My savings account was completely empty. $47,000 vanished through a series of carefully timed transfers. My credit cards were maxed out with purchases I'd never made. Expensive electronics, designer clothes, even a motorcycle. My identity had been used to open loans I'd never seen, including a $30,000 personal loan and a mortgage pre-approval application for a house in Nevada. He's been planning this systematically for months, Marcus said, reviewing the financial statements spread across my parents' dining room table. Look at these dates. He started draining your accounts just 2 weeks after you moved in together. My mother sat beside me, holding my hand while we went through each fraudulent transaction. There were charges for hotels in cities I'd never visited, cash advances taken from ATMs across 3 states, even payments to what looked like other accomplices. How is this possible? I asked. I never gave him my passwords or account numbers. Keylogger software, Marcus explained grimly. He probably installed it on your laptop when you weren't looking. Everything you typed, passwords, bank account numbers, social security number, he could see it all in real time. The violation felt complete and nauseating. He hadn't just stolen my money. He'd been watching my every digital move for months, recording my private conversations, my work emails, my online shopping. We're filing a police report immediately, my sister announced. This isn't just heartbreak. This is identity theft, fraud, and probably a dozen other felonies. The detective assigned to my case, Officer Williams, had kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She'd seen similar schemes before. You're not his first victim, she told me gently as we sat in the Stark interview room. These romance scammers are professionals. They study their targets for months, learn exactly what kind of person you want to fall in love with, then become that person. She opened a thick file folder and showed me photos that made my stomach drop. Other women who looked remarkably similar to me. Blonde, late 20s to early 30s, professional jobs, close families. All targeted specifically for their financial stability and emotional vulnerability. How many? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. That we know of? 11 confirmed victims over the past 3 years. Probably more who haven't come forward out of embarrassment. The FBI got involved when they realized the scope of the operation. The lead investigator was Agent Rodriguez, a sharp woman in her 40s who walked me through Daniel's true methodology with clinical precision. He's not just a con artist, she explained during our first meeting. He's a master manipulator who studies his targets for months before making contact. We've traced his pattern. He follows potential victims on social media, learns their routines, even infiltrates their social circles to gather intelligence. She showed me a timeline that made my skin crawl. He'd been following your Instagram for 4 months before you met. He knew you volunteered at the animal shelter, which is why he happened to adopt a dog the week before your first encounter. He knew about your father's heart attack, your job promotion, even your favorite restaurants. The Montana ranch story, lifted directly from a romance novel. The Stanford MBA, a fake diploma he'd bought online for $200. The charity work in Guatemala, photos stolen from a legitimate volunteer's Facebook page, digitally altered to include his face. He'd created an entire identity designed specifically to appeal to me. The worst discovery came when they searched his real apartment, a rundown studio in a dangerous neighborhood an hour away from the luxury high-rise where I thought he lived. Hidden in a cardboard box under his bed, they found his research materials, journals filled with notes about my personality, my family dynamics, my insecurities and vulnerabilities. He'd documented my father's recent heart attack and how it had made me more protective of family, my mother's anxiety about my single status and her relief when I brought him home, my sister's successful marriage that made me feel behind in life. Look at this entry, Agent Rodriguez said, showing me a page that made me feel sick. He wrote down that you cry during movies about dogs 3 weeks before he suggested watching Marley and Me together. Every romantic gesture, every shared moment, every intimate conversation had been calculated and scripted based on his psychological profile of me. But then Agent Rodriguez showed me something that changed everything, and somehow made it worse. This was hidden in a different box, she said, handing me a small leather journal with a different cover. We found it in a lockbox he'd hidden behind a loose baseboard. The pages were covered in Daniel's handwriting, but these entries were completely different. Raw, unguarded, personal thoughts instead of calculated observations. March 15th. She laughs at my stupid jokes. Real laughs, not the polite ones the others fake, makes her whole face light up. Why does that make me feel sick? This was supposed to be simple. April 2nd. Taught her to cook pierogi today. Except it's not my grandmother's recipe. I found it on some Polish cooking website. But watching her concentrate so hard, flour in her hair, tongue poking out while she kneaded the dough, Christ, what am I doing to her? April 18th. She brought me soup when I faked being sick, sat with me all day, missed work to take care of me. The others would have sent flowers and kept their distance. She's different. This is different. May 20th. She cried during that stupid movie about the dog. I wanted to hold her forever and tell her everything would be okay. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to care. June 8th. I could tell her the truth. We could start over clean. But she'd never forgive me, and she shouldn't. I'm poison disguised as medicine. The final entry was dated 3 days before our wedding. I love her. Actually love her, not the performance of it. And I'm about to destroy the only real thing I've ever had. I'm a coward and a fraud, and she deserves so much better than what I'm about to do to her. But I can't stop. I don't know how to be anyone else. I don't know how to be real. I closed the notebook, feeling hollow and confused and somehow worse than before. Agent Rodriguez watched me carefully. Are you okay? I don't know what I am, I admitted. It would be easier if none of it was real. But knowing that some part of him actually cared makes it, I don't know how to process that. We see this sometimes, she said gently. The predators who start to care about their victims. It doesn't excuse what they do, but it complicates the healing process. She paused, studying my face. We need you to testify when we catch him. His other victims are counting on you to make sure he doesn't do this again. Daniel had vanished completely after Bali, but the FBI was confident they'd find him eventually. Con artists like him were addicted to the lifestyle, which meant he'd surface somewhere, running another elaborate scam. 3 months later, they did. He was in Portland, engaged to a veterinarian named Grace Chen. Same backstory, same romantic timeline, same fake identity as Damon Richards. Except this time, he'd learned from his mistakes with me. No social media trail, better document forgeries, more convincing cover stories for his past. But he'd made one crucial error. He'd used the same fake business references from his previous cons. They arrested him at Grace's apartment during what was supposed to be their engagement party. 20 guests, expensive catering, a ring he'd bought with her own credit card, just like our wedding, funded by his victim's money. Grace called me the next day, sobbing into the phone. I'm so sorry, she kept repeating. I didn't know. The FBI told me about you and the others. I'm so sorry you went through this. It's not your fault, I told her, meaning every word. He's very good at what he does. That's what makes him so dangerous. How do you get past it? She asked through her tears. Knowing that everything was fake, that the person you loved never existed? I didn't have a good answer then. I was still figuring it out myself. The trial was surreal. Sitting across from Daniel in that sterile courtroom, listening to victim after victim tell stories nearly identical to mine, felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. He'd lost weight in jail. The confident posture was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders and nervous fidgeting. When he looked at me during my testimony, I saw the vulnerability from those journal entries, but also something calculating, like he was still trying to figure out what I wanted to hear. When it was my turn to speak, I looked him straight in the eyes. Do you remember what you told me in Bali? I asked, ignoring his lawyer's immediate objection, that some part of it was real. The judge allowed me to continue. I need you to know that I believe you. I think you did fall in love with me, or at least with the version of yourself you became when you were with me. And that's what makes this so much worse. His eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't finished. Because if you could feel love, that means you understood exactly what you were destroying. You knew the pain you'd cause, and you chose to cause it anyway. That's not just fraud. That's cruelty. He was sentenced to 8 years for fraud, identity theft, racketeering, and 11 counts of grand larceny. As they led him away in shackles, he turned back one last time and mouthed, I'm sorry. I nodded, and meant it when I whispered back, I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't give back the trust or the money or the year of my life I spent living in a beautiful lie. Recovery took longer than the investigation and trial combined. Rebuilding my credit was straightforward, if time-consuming. Rebuilding my savings took careful budgeting and help from my family. But rebuilding my ability to trust, especially my ability to trust my own judgment, felt impossible some days. The financial recovery was the easy part. Insurance covered some of the losses. The FBI helped me document everything for the restitution hearing, though I knew I'd never see most of my money again. My family pitched in when I couldn't make rent, never once making me feel like a burden. But the emotional recovery, that was the real work. Every man I met seemed suspicious. Every romantic gesture felt calculated and manipulative. I analyzed conversations for inconsistencies, Googled potential dates obsessively, and kept people at arm's length even when they seemed genuine. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, called it hypervigilance. I called it survival. You're not broken, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session where I'd spent the entire hour picking apart a coworker's invitation to coffee. Your brain is protecting you the only way it knows how. But I miss being able to trust, I said, tears streaming down my face. I miss believing people when they tell me things. I miss not having to fact-check every story and verify every detail. That will come back, she assured me, but it might look different than before. And that's okay. You've learned to be more discerning, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. 2 years later, I was grocery shopping on a random Tuesday evening when someone tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me, you dropped this." I turned to find a man holding my wallet, which had apparently fallen from my purse when I'd been juggling my phone and shopping list. He was cute in an understated way. Messy brown hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it, paint-stained jeans, genuine smile with slightly crooked teeth that suggested he'd never had braces. "Thank you so much," I said, checking quickly that nothing was missing. Everything was there, including the cash I'd just withdrawn. "No problem, I'm Lucas, by the way." Instead of launching into an elaborate backstory about his fascinating life and impressive accomplishments, he just stood there awkwardly, clearly hoping I'd continue the conversation, but not sure how to make that happen gracefully. "I'm Tessa." "Nice to meet you, Tessa. I don't suppose you'd want to grab coffee sometime? I promise I'm not a serial killer or anything weird like that." The old me would have said yes immediately, charmed by his humor and attracted to his understated good looks. The new me said, "Can I get your last name and maybe Google you first?" Most guys would have been offended or thought I was completely crazy. Lucas laughed, a genuine surprised sound. "Lucas Mitchell, please Google away. You'll find my art portfolio, my parking tickets, and probably some embarrassing high school yearbook photos. Fair warning, I had terrible acne and played tuba in the marching band." I pulled out my phone and Googled him right there in the cereal aisle while he waited patiently, occasionally making jokes about how this was either very smart or very insulting, and he wasn't sure which. Everything checked out. Local artist with a small but legitimate following, boring social media presence with photos going back years, zero red flags that I could detect. We had coffee the next week, then dinner a few days later, then a second date where he showed me his studio, a converted garage behind his rented house, filled with half-finished paintings and art supplies scattered everywhere. "This is my real life," he said, gesturing around the chaotic but clearly productive space. "Pretty unglamorous, but it's mine." His paintings were good, not gallery-worthy, but honest and full of feeling. Landscapes of places he'd actually visited, portraits of people he actually knew. When I asked about his artistic process, he didn't embellish or exaggerate his talent. "I teach art classes at the community center to pay the bills and paint in my spare time," he said simply. "Someday I'd like to have a real studio, maybe sell enough pieces to quit teaching. But for now, this works." 3 months in, I told him about Daniel. All of it. The fake marriage, the stolen money, the trial, the journals, everything. Lucas listened without judgment, asking clarifying questions but never making me feel like a victim or an idiot for falling for it. "I'm glad you're careful," he said when I finished my story. "You should be. And I'm glad you're giving me a chance anyway. We've been together 10 months now. He knows I still Google him sometimes, that I occasionally check his phone when he's in the shower, that certain romantic gestures make me panic instead of swoon. He's patient with my damage. But more than that, he's genuinely, authentically real. His stories have inconsistencies because memory is imperfect, not because they're fabricated. His phone has normal stuff on it. Texts from his mom asking when he's coming for dinner, photos of his elderly dog, work emails about art classes, apps he actually uses. When he tells me about his childhood, details change slightly each time because that's how human memory works. When he talks about college, he includes the boring parts and the embarrassing failures along with whatever highlights there might have been. Last month, I met his college roommates at a backyard barbecue. They told embarrassing stories about him that matched what he'd already told me, the time he accidentally set his dorm room on fire making ramen at 2 a.m., the semester he nearly failed statistics because he kept skipping class to work on a painting. No performance, no script, no carefully rehearsed anecdotes. Just a guy who makes decent art, burns dinner regularly, and loves me enough to understand why I need proof that he's real. My family adores him, especially my mother, who pulled me aside during his first family dinner. "This one's different," she said, watching Lucas help my dad fix a broken cabinet while they argued good-naturedly about the best way to use a screwdriver. "How can you tell?" She smiled. "He's not trying to impress us. He's just trying to help. And look, he's actually terrible at home repair, but he's not pretending to be good at it. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, panicked that I'm being fooled again, that I've missed some crucial red flag that will unravel everything. But then I see Lucas's paint-stained fingers on the pillow next to me, or hear him singing off-key in the shower, or watch him struggle to tell a coherent story without getting distracted by random tangents and side details. He's beautifully, messily human. His life has rough edges and mundane details and boring stretches that con artists never include in their carefully crafted performances. And that's how I know he's real. Daniel stole 18 months of my life and $80,000 of my money. He taught me that love could be a weapon, that trust could be a dangerous vulnerability, that the people who seem too good to be true usually are. But he also taught me something valuable: the difference between performance and authenticity, between charm and genuine kindness, between someone who tells you what you want to hear and someone who tells you what you need to know. Now when someone shows me who they are, I believe them, both the red flags and the green ones. My family was right to worry about Damon, but they were wrong about one thing. I wasn't crazy for wanting love. I was just looking in the wrong places, mistaking polish for substance and performance for genuine connection. The man I married was a fiction designed specifically to exploit my dreams and vulnerabilities, but the woman who survived him is stronger, wiser, and infinitely more careful than she was before, and she knows the difference between a pretty lie and beautiful truth.